I'd like to call this committee of the whole for Monday, February 25th to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Here.
Mr. Bowersox?
Here.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Present.
Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe? Ms. Stevenson?
Present.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. We have a full house this evening. Are there any additions to the agenda this evening? Okay. Is there a staff report? Mayor, is there a staff report? Do you know? Oh, Libby has a staff report. Libby Tyler, our Community Development Director.
These are announcements coming up. First, the Cunningham Avenue Beautification Plan, which we're working with CBA Landscape Architects, will be coming to town next week for a charrette. So the activities are a public visioning workshop next Tuesday, March 4th, from 5:30 to 7 here at the City Council Chambers, 400 South Vine Street. The charrette presentation will then follow on Thursday, March 6th, from 5 to 7 p.m., again here at the City Council Chambers. And this will be a beautification plan for Cunningham Avenue from the interstate to University Avenue. Tuesday, workshop and charrette presentation Thursday evening. There's also a series of television shows planned for Up TV. That's our channel, public channel here on Channel 6. This is coming up in March, and one day in April, Saturdays at 4 p.m. The series is called Inside Historic Urbana. So Saturdays at 4 p.m. on Up TV. The first will be next Saturday, March 1st, with Lindley House, followed by the Ricker House, the Sheldon House, the Matt Busey House, Buena Vista Court, and the Princess Theater. So it's a series of 6 shows on Saturdays at 4 p.m. inside Historic Urbana. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other staff reports? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting from February 11th?
So moved.
I second.
There's a motion from Lynn and a second from Dennis. Any corrections? Go ahead, Charlie.
It was a moment of silence, not 5 minutes. And that's in item number 1. Called for 5 minutes of silence. I don't think we were quiet that long.
Any other changes to the minutes? Do you take that as a friendly amendment, Lynn and Dennis?
Totally agree with that.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. Next, we have time for public input. If there are folks who would like to speak to the committee of the whole, if you would come forward and just state your name and address. You can sit here at the microphone. The little black thing on the table is the microphone. I don't have any particular slips from other folks, so if other folks want to speak, if you could fill out a form that's in the back of it's this yellow form in the back, and give it to the clerk, that would be helpful. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Lori Walker. I'm program coordinator and program director for Don Murray Boys and Girls Club, and this is another program coordinator. Her name is Brittany Fryer. She runs our Smart Moves program, and today we are here to say thank you as well as update you on our extended teen night program, and it's our after school program. I have a copy of our program report for the extended teen night program that you all assisted with, as well as a copy of our scorecard for any additional information. And then we have a token of appreciation for all of the committee members, just to highlight pictures that highlight the program from the summer that the kids, we picked up about roughly 300 or more youth from the Scottswood and East Urbana area each for 3 days a week during our extended teen night. Within that, they got a dinner meal, as well as they got to participate in all of the programming from 6 to 11 p.m. And the transportation was as well as provided back home. All of the youth benefited from that program, and this year we're looking to expand and so that we can serve the Scottswood as well as Sunnycrest and Prairie Green apartments as well. We were centrally located with the Scottswoods residents because we worked with the staff person over there that manages the apartment complex, so he helped in assisting with getting all of the families signed up for the program. And then all of the kids, each day we sent 2 van loads out to Scottswood to pick up all the kids and drop them back off. And so the pictures will highlight that as well.
Thank you for all your work with that. Did any of the committee members have questions for the reps from the Don Moyers Boys and Girls Club? Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
I'd love to have some of the photographs in it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Some do and some don't. Okay, I got it.
Well, I just want to say that any program that involves the young people of the community and gives them an option to enjoy each other's company and have fun for an afternoon or an evening has got to be a great thing. And the fact that you've taken the effort to engage the kids in the neighborhood, pick them up, take them to the club, have fun with them, bring them back safely, is certainly worth credit. So thank
So
you
in
so
the
much.
packet, you will find the program report, the final program report from Extended Teen Night. You will find our current scorecard on the top. It shows all of our statistics and data broke down for Urbana students as well as Champaign, the age group, the gender, and the ethnicity of each child that we serve is represented on that scorecard, as well as you'll find a copy of the survey that each child took. And a lot of the kids from Urbana took that survey that day, and it just highlights a lot of the concerns of the program, as good and bad. Things that we're doing very well, and then things that we would love to improve on. And the youth gave us all of the input back on that, so you have the results from that as well. And we will say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
These are really nice. I said I could go take you one. Those are so nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, each one looks like it's a different event.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone else here from the public who'd like to speak to the committee this evening? Okay. If not, we'll move on to ordinance number 2008-02-006. This is an ordinance approving an amendment to the redevelopment agreement with Five Points Realty LLC. This refers to the northwest corner of Cunningham Avenue and University Avenue Gateway Shops. We're going to hear from Tom Carino, our Economic Development Coordinator.
You have before you an amended redevelopment agreement with 5 Points Realty, which is for the Gateway Shops property. In February 2005, City Council approved the original redevelopment agreement, and due to items that were not addressed in the original agreement, the developer and city staff determined that an amendment was in order. Major changes include the way we are defining the project as defined in the development agreement. The original development agreement called for 50,000 square feet of total improvements. That has been changed. That definition also originally included the entire site. We're changing that definition to include only the large lot, which is lot 100, and the definition has been changed to include 30,000 square feet of retail space, or 80 to 130 room hotel plus not less than approximately 10,500 square feet of retail, or option 3 is a 130 or more room hotel. Other changes include how the increment and the rebate are going to be calculated on an annual basis. We are also increasing the upfront contribution, which was originally set at $150,000. We are increasing that to $200,000 to help with larger than expected infrastructure costs. We're also changing the rebate term of the agreement from 10 years, which was the original agreement, to increasing that to 2022. And the reason for that means that the developer has an incentive to move forward quickly. The original agreement was for 10 years from whenever the project was completed, Now what we're saying is if you complete the project quickly, you could increase that to 12 years worth of rebates. If you don't do the project quickly, it will be less than 10 years. So it's an incentive for the developer to move forward quickly on that. And also the value of the project has changed. As I mentioned, it originally included the entire site, which was, the project value was about $7 million. Because we've changed that to include just the large lot, Lot 100, we've reduced that value to $3,500,000. However, what the agreement doesn't mention is that that does not include the value of the outlots, which need to be incorporated in when doing the fiscal analysis. So the fiscal impact you have before you. When the developer satisfies the terms of the agreement, there'll be a significant positive fiscal impact to both the city and the TIF district. And the developer has indicated an interest to move forward expeditiously upon approval. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions from committee members? Dennis?
Well, I don't know if it's a question or maybe it's just discussion. Maybe I should wait.
Could we take, this is such a complicated development agreement, let's just focus on questions first,
Okay.
so that we really understand what's being presented to us without judgments or analysis, and then let's talk, then let's get a motion on the table and talk. Brandon, and then Lynn.
Okay, I think I have a few simple questions. I'll keep it to the questions only. Tom, do you know how many square feet were going to be in the outlots? In other words, were in the original agreement allocated towards outlots that, of course, now aren't in the agreement?
The original agreement contemplated 50,000 square feet of total improvements. What that meant is if now the original agreement did call for possibly a hotel motel. What that meant was if the developer built a 50,000 square foot hotel or motel, there could be no outlot development. So it didn't contemplate the square footage of the outlots. It only said the development had to have 50,000 square feet of total improvements.
Okay. And can you give some examples of, I understand the change in definition of retail, at least for the purposes of this draft agreement. Can you give some examples of things that weren't in the old definition of retail but are in the new? I know hotel is one of those items that is added to that category, but can you describe a little more what other sorts of things necessitated or prompted this change?
Well, the original definition could have potentially included hotel motel. So that hasn't been added, it's been clarified. And the reason it's been clarified, there was some discussion about the credit union, whether that is a retail business. And really, that provision was included at the city's request. The city wanted to tighten up the definition of retail. Previously, it was somewhat vague and could have been interpreted in a couple different ways. So, for example, the credit union would not be considered a retail business at this point, based on this definition, whereas previously it could have been. So, again, that definition was added at the city's request.
Okay, my last question is simply, was there any discussion or any possibilities or legal ways that through this agreement we could somehow guarantee to the people of Urbana who are investing in this project that the outlots actually happen? I know the outlots have been carved out of this agreement and now aren't part of this draft, and that makes sense because the developer obviously won't be the one building them and so doesn't maybe want to be obligated to building a certain X number of square feet if the developer's not the person who's really going to be doing it. He's going to be trying to sell those lots. But is there some legal means, is there any way that you all discussed, that the outlots could still be something that the people of Urbana get as a commitment out of this agreement?
We would need to amend the draft amended agreement, but yes, it could be done. Okay. The reason the outlots were taken out of the project definition was because of the fact that it was very complicated related to the TIF rebate and calculating increment. The original development agreement did not contemplate the parcelization of the outlots. The assumption was the outlots are part of the project, and we're going to offer a TIF rebate on all of this, and it'll be easy to calculate because it'll all be one owner. And because of the parcelization of the outlots, that was somewhat complicated, and so we went through an extremely lengthy negotiation process to figure out how best to handle this. Yeah. And what we arrived at was let's exclude the outlots.
Okay, thank you.
And that
my
was
question.
a determination of not only city staff and the developer, but our special counsel related to the development agreements.
Okay, thanks.
Litton and then Dennis. Oh, excuse me, Litton and then Charlie and then Dennis.
I was going to go ahead and put the motion on the table that we move this forward to council with a motion for approval.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion from Lynn and a second from Heather. Could we continue to take questions first?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I just
So,
want to get it on.
Charlie and then Dennis.
I'm a little confused on this. The original agreement had a $150,000 upfront contribution for the entire parcel, and the rebate was based on the entire parcel. The rebate, what's the maximum rebate that can occur here, or is there a maximum?
The agreement does not have a cap on the rebate, so there is no maximum. The maximum would be based on how quickly the project gets done and how quickly the rebates start being rebated. So again, based on the fact that it goes through 2022, which is the life of the TIF, it behooves the developer to move forward quickly, get the project in the works so as to start collecting those rebates. But to answer your question, there is no cap on the rebate.
Okay. And to continue along this line, okay, so we're going from $150,000 up front to $200,000, and but is the rebate based on, there was an original rebate based on the entire project, and now there's a rebate based on the subset of basically half the square footage here, the 350,000 or 350 million or $3.5 million piece of the project. So it seems like we're getting half the project for as much or more rebate money plus upfront costs.
The TIF rebate will be not just on the large lot, but it will be on the outlots as well.
And so the TIF rebate's on the outlots, but who's going to get the money for who gets the rebate then? The owner of the outlot or the developer who sold the outlot? That's not clear from this agreement either.
The developer receives the benefit on the rebate on the outlot.
So basically, they get to develop the property and sell it twice.
Well, they develop the property, they would sell it to an end user, and then they would continue to collect the rebate on that outlot. The developer would continue to collect the rebate on that
It seems like you're
outlot.
getting paid twice for the same. You develop the lot and you're getting paid twice here.
The theory would be that because of the city's investment, the developer was able to take a property that might not be developable on the free market and use that incentive to make it more developable, or make it more marketable, would be the theory.
Okay, I guess I'd like to see what the total potential rebate is over the life of this project. That's part of the numbers in here to completely understand it, including the pieces on the outlot. It's a little confusing.
I just wanted to add, with respect to the incentives for the outlots, we were, as city staff, less concerned with the marketability of the outlots than we were with completion of the inline shops. Based on our experience with other projects, there's keen interest in the outlots. The practicality of including the outlots in the agreement in the same fashion that it was previously just wasn't, it got very cumbersome. And so we actually redrafted it to separate the two parts of the project, but we are in full expectation that the outlots will complete their development. We wanted to make sure the remainder got started and completed expeditiously. So I just wanted to add that distinction.
Okay, yeah, but that makes it even clearer to me that the people who buy the outlot and develop the outlot then are taking the risk and should be the ones that benefit from the rebate, not the original developer. Now, why shouldn't the person who's buying the outlot and putting up a business there get the rebate, because they're the ones taking the risk?
It's not how this is structured by the developer, and they are here today to answer questions as well.
Yeah, well, that's where I'm stuck on this. I'm really concerned about that kind of a situation.
Dennis, you had questions, and then Lynn.
Well, I have a few concerns, but I'll just ask a question. One of them is that according to the development, some of the items that might be built on an outlot, possible development scenario, it says, is a drugstore on one outlot and a casual dining restaurant on the remaining 2 outlots. Could you define what a casual dining establishment is, and can you give me examples?
That could mean a variety of things. Casual dining establishment could be a casual sit-down restaurant. It could also be, I don't know if I'd say fast food restaurant, but certainly would be a casual dining restaurant would be one that you could go in casual attire, sit down at a table, and have a meal.
Such as McDonald's?
I'm not sure if the market would bear a McDonald's that close to another McDonald's, but
well, I'm just
I
as an
understand
example.
what you're saying. I'm not sure if the developer is looking for a fast food place at that location, but there's been some discussion. I'm not sure if the market and the developer would be interested in having a fast food restaurant. When casual dining restaurant, let me put it this way: when I calculated the TIF benefit for a casual dining restaurant, I used the example of Monocle's. That's the value that I pulled for recent projects was a Monocle's building, how much that cost to build, and I then used that in my fiscal analysis. So maybe that would be an example of a casual dining restaurant, although I don't know if that would be, obviously I don't know if it's going to be a Monocle's, but that's the model I used.
Yeah, so that was a knowledgeable choice of models?
It seemed a reasonable choice for the location to use something like that. It was Monocle's is a project that's being built currently, so permit data is available, how much the construction cost is available. Mm-hmm. It just seemed like a good, reasonable number to use and a good, reasonable business to use.
Okay. Thank you.
Lynn?
Thanks. I guess from a council perspective and from a community perspective, I think our greatest interest is in that the property actually gets developed and that there's businesses that are viable on the property. And as far as who gets the rebate, if the developer feels that they are in a strong position, still getting the rebate, but still being able to, sell those outlots, even though the owner doesn't get the rebate, I mean, I say go for it. Because what they're doing, I would think with that money, is they develop that property, whether they put pedestrian lights up or lights or, other things that they do, but they make it more ready-made for somebody to come in and establish a business. Is that not correct? Financially, they would have the more means to be able to put more into that in terms of infrastructure to make it more more quickly developable.
Again, the theory is that the city's contribution will go into infrastructure and development of the project, and will then make that project more marketable to end users who might not otherwise have the financial wherewithal to do their project at the site.
I do have some questions before we get into debate. Charlie, are you questions or debate?
Yeah, I still don't understand where this money is going for. I thought the lots are just simply going to be sold as is, undeveloped. That's not clear to me from the agreement, that they're going to get sewers and this and that paid for by the developer. And ultimately, who's taking the risk? The person who buys and builds the property or the developer? It strikes me that the person taking the risk is the person who buys and builds on that lot. And that strikes me as that's what I don't understand here, is if you're taking a risk and you're buying this property, I assume you're paying for, if it's developed, you're paying for the full cost of the property, unless the developer is going to agree to discount that property based on the rebate. That would be a different situation, but I don't see that as part of the agreement.
Let me actually ask a question that might help to clarify this, which is it possible that the development incentive goes to the developer who sells the outlot? Is it then the case that we should anticipate or would consider an additional development agreement with the retail outlet or the whether it be an Applebee's or a Burger King, the the dining establishment that happens there, would it be the case that actually we would be looking at another development agreement on top of this one, or some kind of incentive that's not calculated in the financials that we were given in our memo?
That's possible, but unlikely, and the site preparation costs, which cover the entire site and benefit the outlots, were close to $2 million and counting. So that makes those outlots accessible from the street. That includes intersection improvements, which are bid but not yet completed. It included the grading, the sidewalks, the driveways. So those outlots are developable in a way that they weren't previously, and that's a cost that the developer has borne, and this, under the amended agreement, the city would pay for a fraction of that with a $200,000 upfront cost. Our anticipation is that no further TIF incentive would be necessary for, beyond this agreement, for inline shop, hotel, or outlot development.
Dennis, and then Lynn. And I have some additional questions, but I'll allow others to speak first.
It was my understanding that the original direction of the development was a wide-scale or an encompassing vision for the development of this corner, and that there was a certain quality level anticipated for the development style of the buildings and the integrated look of the development as a whole. We've had that expressed through the development of the street plan, but it looks like at this point we're surrendering a certain amount of design expectation, because the outlots will now be developed by secondary individual corporations or groups. And so I'm asking, I guess, if the general overall design plan for the, say, building materials, structural details that we once were shown, or at least suggested that these were a part of the concept of the plan, have now been basically set aside because the development is taking a different turn. And will we have basically no oversight or very little oversight for the outlot development if we proceed with this plan rather than the original concept?
There was, if you look back, since the initial agreement, there was a special use permit granted for the shopping center portion. Now, the outlot development is allowable by right in our zoning ordinance, so we never did have design control over those elements. We did, through the first agreement and then through the special use permit, exert site control over the inline shop portion and the common improvements that benefit the whole shopping center. So those expectations and conditions are still in force. And it is anticipated to be a high-quality development. The first outlot development that is now open, the credit union, I think is a very high standard for outlot development, and we would hope to see the others follow suit.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Is the concept of envisioned for a unified signing or signage on the property still an aspect of this development, or perhaps not?
The special use permit includes signage for the shopping center as a whole, so that was addressed. It did not get very detailed in terms of what each of the shops' wall signs, for example, would look like. And we will continue to encourage handsome signage, monument signage. We are constrained by the special use permit, although that did have a higher expectation as part of signage in our zoning ordinance. But we don't have a sign package in front of us currently to review. That will come down the road.
I'll pass until later.
Okay. Thanks. we're focused on one concern, which I agree with, and I actually have some other concerns, so I'd like to ask some very specific questions. What was the planned infrastructure and environmental costs that, and how is it different than the $2 million that have been spent?
That's probably best for the developer to respond to. I know that there were unanticipated costs related to the intersection improvements at Broadway and University. Those haven't been completed yet, but those were unanticipated. I know that there was some containment required on an engineered barrier, it's called, on the northeast corner of Broadway and University. That was also unanticipated. And I would ask the developer to just provide a little more detail on the specifics of the development.
Okay, I will do that. The second is, was there discussion of, I guess looking at this, I think worst case scenario is that we get half the development, the outlots stay fallow and don't work, or they turn into Burger Kings, and there isn't any agreement that those outlots would actually be built within any time frame. So we've kind of lost our time frame on it. How do we guarantee that the outlots get developed? And why wouldn't we do something like require a sale of those outlots by 2012 as part of this agreement? Why wouldn't we build into the agreement the date that things need to be sold by, or so that they're moving forward?
I think because there's been so much interest in the outlots, we did not feel that was necessary.
Okay. I have a question about the EAV part. I was very confused by the bottom of page 2 on the memo. It says the equalized assessed value of this property was approximately $800,000 at the time that O'Brien's was located there. Is that correct? So that number comes from that time when
Actually,
O'Brien's was
I think the $810,000 was established at the creation of the TIF. That's the base value at the creation of the TIF, not the value when O'Brien was there.
Okay, so I guess I'm trying to understand. Do you know what the value was when O'Brien was there?
I don't have it in front of me, but we could figure that out.
Okay, so is it the case that when it says the amended agreement provides for the base EAV to be recalculated annually using information provided by the Champaign County Clerk's Office, what does that mean? And does it mean that it will be recalculated to be the value of a blank parking lot, or?
No, the reason that is in there based on the recommendation of our special legal counsel, and the reason that's in there is because in part because of the Park District land swap. The Park District property did not have any equalized assessed value at the creation of the TIF. Some of that property that had no EAV is now part of the private development project. So special legal counsel and I went to the assessor's office to try to figure out how they were going to set up the value of the part of the project that had EAV that was now Park District property versus Park District property that was now part of the private development project, and they had not yet assigned those values. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have a value at the time, and our special legal counsel said the easiest way to address this, every year the assessor's office sets the base value and the current value to every property within a TIF. Mm-hmm. So every year they will have to redetermine based on land swaps and what had value, what didn't, what the base value of a property was at the creation of the TIF and what the current value is. And again, our legal counsel determined the easiest way to calculate that was to determine how the assessor calculated it annually. And that's a confusing explanation, yeah. But again, for the ease of calculation, we determine let the assessor handle the calculations, and we'll just take their numbers every year and use them.
So I guess the question I have is, by doing that, are we basically dropping the EAV below 810 plus the value of the Park District land?
honestly, we just don't know until the assessor recalculates this. We don't know if the 810 will go down or go up based on the Park District property.
Okay,
We just don't know yet.
But isn't it the case, well, I don't know what was at that corner when the TIF was created. Was O'Brien's at the corner of,
It was a hotel.
Hotel.
it was a hotel? Okay, so there's a hotel there, then it turned into O'Brien's. So I guess the question I have is it a liability for us to have it float such that it's adjusted to reflect no development at that location, which is, I mean, no buildings at that location other than now the bank. Is that a liability for us in this agreement?
Our special legal counsel did not think so.
Okay.
That's why they recommended it, because he spent a fair amount of time contemplating this and determined it was in our best interest to have the assessor calculated it. Not calculated, but have the assessor provide us the numbers annually and then have us calculate it.
Okay. Is it possible that we could get pole signs on the outlot development? Yes, okay. I guess in looking at this, I'm extremely supportive of this development going forward. And I kind of have a proposal for how it could go forward that, and I'd like to get staff feedback on it before we kind of discuss it as council, which is, yes, let's move forward with the development. Yes, let's make sure it happens soon. There's a couple of pieces missing in the agreement that seem like really important pieces in our best interest. And the first is, we need site control over the outlots. And since this is a development agreement, it seems like we're opening up, before we're working with one developer, we had some, sense of what kind of site control we were going to have, and it wasn't going to be sold. Now that the outlets are being sold, it seems very appropriate that we could exhibit the site control with signage, et cetera, on that site. So that seems to be something that's not in it that I think needs to be there. The second is, I don't understand why we would consider a TIF longer than 10 years. I think it already is an incentive to say you're cut off at 2012. So your incentive is, you're already, it's been a while getting this thing off the ground. Your incentive is you're cut off at 2012. Why would we actually create a situation where people would have 10 years, 13 years of TIF for a project that's half the size potentially? So I don't want to see, I don't think I can see justification for more than 10 years for the TIF. And I still support the 2012 cutoff, which would be that kind of incentive. And I think that we need to somehow figure out how to guarantee the outlet development in some way. If you're saying if it's a done deal, or it's not a done deal, but it's very likely to happen, it seems like building that into this development agreement would make sense and would not necessarily affect the developer. It seems like we're giving it a deep rebate based on the size of the project, and now the size of the project is smaller in terms of what we're being guaranteed. Certainly we can talk about what could be, but in terms of what's guaranteed, it's half the size. So I don't understand. The only arguments I've heard is there were additional infrastructure and environmental costs, and I haven't heard any of the other arguments that would argue for having longer TIF, incentive, half the size, no outlet guarantee, greater money up front, and a later date to open. It just seems like a lot of negatives for the city, and I don't see what the city is getting out of this draft redevelopment agreement. And at this point, I'm actually not comfortable moving forward with the way it is. I think that we need to see we need to see a financial picture that is just for this development and doesn't include the outlots, because those aren't agreed. We need to see the financials that Charlie looked at, and I think we need to discuss this issue of no more than 10 years, making sure that we have site control on the outlot developments, et cetera. So that's where I stand on the issue. Other folks, Brandon.
Well, I guess I was wondering if we could hear from the developer, because some of these questions were for them, switch into that sort of question mode, and then break out the discussion piece, if
Yes,
people are ready.
and I'd like to hear from staff, too, about some of the things that you've said and what their feedback is on that.
So could we hear from staff first and then?
Yeah, I
from
think
the
maybe staff
developer?
first
Okay.
and then the developer. Come on back, Libby. I guess just to ask the questions, I guess I'd be interested if, you guys probably considered some of these things, but
We can certainly try. Took us 7 or 8 months to negotiate this. Took a lot of work. We made a lot of progress. We can go back and try again. The project was pretty well dead for a while. It was in process of being sold, and it's going to remain local, and we're trying to revive it through this lengthy negotiation process. It was complicated by the split between the shopping center and the outlots. We're trying to protect the city's interests. We can certainly go back and try to get a better deal, and it will take longer, I'm sure, to get that deal, but we can try that. The site control over the outlots, we do have that through our development and zoning regulations, so it's not like we have no control. And we do have the built-in incentives for monument signs. So that's not something that we're necessarily lacking. We just haven't tailored it to these outlots. In part, that's hard to do because we don't have a tenant or a user to tailor it for, but we well understand the preference for unified signage and for monument signage. We can discuss the timeline. I think there was a thought that that incentive would be beneficial in getting the project back on track. As far as guaranteeing the outlot development, again, we can request that. Didn't seem particularly necessary, but we can make another attempt. I don't know, Tom, is that your sense?
Yeah, I would agree with you in that the outlots weren't a concern of ours because of the fact that they just seem to be more inherently marketable. But we could certainly go back and ask about that. And then, again, the control over outlot development, we could certainly ask. Because the developer may or may not know who those end users that he's negotiating with are, that may be a constraint on negotiating sale of the outlots, but we could certainly go back and work on those.
May I make a comment? I guess I'd just like to caution us, I mean, this agreement's taken 7 to 8 months. The project definitely languished for a number of years. I don't know how long it's been, maybe 2 years. And I think, think about this. What's the worst negative for Urbana? Is it for it to go on longer and have nothing happen? I think we have to weigh the value of maybe cutting back a couple years on that rebate versus getting things moving sooner rather than later. I think these are key questions that we need to ask ourselves as a council, because I think economic development is one of our most important features, and we want to facilitate it as much as we can, not just rolling over, but I think our staff have put a lot of thought and effort in here, and I think are trying to do what they believe is best on our behalf, knowing all the ins and outs of what's transpired historically and currently at that location.
Dennis and then Charlie.
Isn't it true that this is the most traffic corner in Urbana? That in the county, isn't this like the most prime piece of real estate that is available right now for development?
That's great.
And so shouldn't we be the most protective and most cautious about how it's developed so we don't just throw this away? That's my question.
Charlie.
Yeah, well, one would think that given that kind of a scenario, issue that peeves me in general is the issue is when development is done at the taxpayer expense, and many times the taxpayer is subsidizing much of the risk and not sharing in the subsequent profit. The taxpayer shouldn't be subsidizing a private business's profits. Okay, what's in this for the city? If we come out break even after 5 or 10 years, is that really, what I want to do is, are we getting the deal that we should be getting for a prime piece of real estate? Is the taxpayer who's taking the risk getting the return that the taxpayer should be getting? If we're giving 80% of the incremental property tax rebate for 12 years, I'm not sure that that's getting the taxpayer's risk back to the taxpayer. I mean, that's a really large incentive to me. And until I see the actual financials and what the minimums and maximums are, I can't judge whether the taxpayer is getting a good deal here or not. And that's my problem. I'm not willing to do economic development just for the sake of economic development without knowing the full picture, and that's what I don't have here.
Shall we, go ahead, Libby.
That 80% rebate is pretty standard for retail. We've used that for years, 50% on office and 80% on retail. Term is, pardon me? The term has been traditionally 10 years. So this was a little different approach, and it was merely as an incentive. It wasn't meant to expand the benefit. There's pretty lengthy fiscal analysis included in the memorandum. We've had so many comments about the status of this site, and it is an important site. It is hurtful to the city's economy to have it underperform in terms of development. So we've had several months, almost a year, when the group from Chicago was looking at the purchase, and then again several months to resurrect the development agreement to reflect the changed conditions. And we've seen, the developer has seen, I'm sure he'll tell you, many choice tenants go elsewhere. So there was a sense and urgency in trying to retool this to bring it back so it can be everything it can be in terms of a development. We were working with guidelines that we've used for years, and with our Ken Beth, who's drafted almost all the development agreements we've worked with over the last several years. So I'm sure we can work to improve it further, but we were using a lot of the same fiscal tests that we've used over and over again, that this council's seen over and over again. We weren't trying to do anything too unusual, but there were some aspects that were requested by the developer that are included here.
Brandon?
Just a really quick follow-up. You mentioned the 80% over 10-year TIF rebate. Did that 80% ever go to a hotel use, or did we ever have 50% going to a hotel use, or have we just never had to really decide whether hotel fit in the 50 or 80 category before?
Hampton was an 80%. We looked that one up, as I recall. That was one. And the thing with the hotel, and we did a whole analysis, and be happy to share some of the back analysis that was conducted. Hotels present a positive fiscal impact to the city because of the hotel-motel tax, and then because of the indirect benefits for the visitors staying there. And of course, they eat out and they shop, and so we feel, from an economic standpoint, it's very much a positive. In some respects, more positive than a lot of the standard retail uses.
Perhaps Linton.
Just a couple more comments. On page 4, I think there's a fairly robust explanation of, and the tax increment is, of course, much smaller than the overall tax benefit. You know, if there are vibrant businesses on this corner that would come to the people of Urbana, and I think Urbana is, really looking for that. And I think the other thing to make note of is, certainly this is a prime piece of property for our city, but we're not competing just within ourselves for businesses. We're competing with hot spots over on Windsor Road, hot spots on North Prospect and Champaign. And so I think, because of those other hot spots is one reason why this hasn't been necessarily picked up as quickly, with people saying, hey, I want to be there. So I think that our staff has used their judgment to try to figure out, well, what's that right balance between, the city helping to promote this project and the developer hanging in there and pushing it and driving him a little bit, to make this happen for Urbana.
Maybe we could hear from the developers on some of the issues. One issue was the question of what has changed, given that this is prime real estate at this corner, what's the challenge that requires us to come forward with greater incentive? And then the second was, what was the planned infrastructure and environmental costs, and how did they differ from the $2 million? Could you give us some background that leads to some of the changes that are being requested? Joe Petrie?
Hi.
Hi.
Joe Petrie, Gateway Shops, Ivan Richardson, my partner Neil Richardson, our partner, and Kristen Menig, the site manager. Thank you very much for having the opportunity to talk with you today about this. Do you want to repeat your questions, and let's just start with one
Yeah, just,
first.
I think one of the questions on the table that Dennis brought up was that this is one of the highest traffic count, I think it's the highest traffic count place in Champaign County, and what are some of the challenges that have led to difficulty moving forward with this project? That's the first question.
Okay, just, I guess a point of fact, I believe it's the fourth highest traffic count in Champaign County. It certainly is very high traffic, and it, as far as I understand, the highest in the city of Urbana. And that's what attracted us to this. That was despite some obvious issues that were the reasons behind it not having developed previously. And I know, we would like to have seen this develop faster. At the same time, if you look back a couple of years ago and see that site, I think in retrospect you'd see the improvements were dramatic already. The O'Brien site, has moved on, and we've done the demolition, we've done environmental, we've got a no further remediation letter from the Illinois EPA. Costly both in time and dollars. You may or may not realize it, but there have been serious, well, I'm sure you realize it, there have been serious flooding issues that part of town. And with the kinds of dollars that we and our partners in this are looking to invest, conservatively, before this is done, it's $10 to $12 million. We felt it was necessary, upon the recommendation of our engineer, to raise that site 7 to 8 feet at various locations. That's 40,000 cubic yards of dirt. I don't know if you have any idea how much that is and how costly it is to get moved to that site, so that the site is improved, so that it is sitting in an elevation that it's going to be a gateway to the city of Urbana. We're very serious about presenting this. This is a reflection of us, as well as a reflection of the city of Urbana, and we have spared literally no expense in our commitment to bring that up to speed. So certainly, in terms of some of the expenses that we've incurred, there have been environmental expenses, things that were not identified in the initial site work done. Some of those things came up later. The most recent thing, besides the enormous expense of the dirt, was the $72,000 that we're going to undertake in the spring to improve the Broadway University intersection, something that frankly has been languishing for a long time, and we're happy to step up to the plate to do that. But that's another $72,000 that add to the approximate $2 million that we've spent so far just in the site work. The site work is for the entire site, obviously. I mean, that the entire site was raised, the entire site has sewer, the entire site has electrical and other utilities already presented to it, and is a far cry. Yes, absolutely. It's what's termed as pad ready. Yeah. So the amount of investment that somebody needs to come in, the University of Illinois Employees Credit Union, for instance, what they have to do is a total different ballgame than if we just gave them, 0.97 acres at that corner, because it is, the sewer. We couldn't sell it in parcels until the entire site was prepared and developed, because of the water flows and things. Absolutely, yes.
Turn on your mic, Charlie.
I'm sorry. So the sidewalk's done. I'm trying to remember. I know there's lighting in the parking lot, because I was just there a couple days ago. It's my bank, so I'm glad to see them there.
Good for you.
So I mean, I like it. I totally like this project. I just want to make sure that the taxpayer gets their fair share
Absolutely.
here, and that's my big take on this. You say pad ready. So are there lights in front, or what additional investments do you have to make to get somebody onto a lot?
Basically, those are pad ready. The utilities, the sewer, the sidewalks, all that is installed and ready to go. So you may not recall, because as you kind of drive through, but the sidewalks have all been, completely redone in the perimeter. Yeah. So those have all been completed.
Were there other questions for the developer? We had Brandon and Dennis.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I too am excited about this and want to one way or another see it get off the ground real soon. One of the things I wonder about in the timing is the outlot sales and sort of how ready those are to be sold. I know you heard Louis Tyler and Tom Carino both say those are really strongly desirable, that those outlets could be sold handily, but I know one is sold and the other three haven't yet. Were you marketing that one sooner than the other three, or is there any reason that if there is a lot of pressure from the market to get things built on those outlots, that the other three haven't gone as well?
I think what you don't understand, we got all this money invested. We're paying interest. We ain't got no income coming off of this. So it just makes sense. Our incentive to do this as quick as possible is going to make us tons of money. So, I mean, I can imagine why you think that we ain't going to push this or do anything we got to do to make these lots go. We're going to do because we owe all this money and ain't no income coming in there. So that's what I think kids are missing that point. I mean, I don't think if you're not developed, maybe you don't realize you tie up millions of dollars and they got no income, you're going to make things happen. And that's exactly why, we're wanting this thing to happen as soon as possible because it's costing us thousands of dollars every month.
Yeah,
and
no,
I mean,
definitely.
that's incentive.
Right. No, I'm a business person. I definitely understand. You have a lot on the line now, and your incentive is totally to get these things done soon, regardless of whether we give you more incentive to do them sooner than later. But do you feel like the outlots will be easier to sell than inline shops? Is that market sort of analysis that Libby and Tom mentioned kind of right? Does that seem like there's been a lot of interest in the outlots and that those should be easy to
There certainly
sell?
there has been a lot of interest in the outlets. There's a few issues. Egress and ingress is probably the biggest challenge, especially on Outlot 4, which is the largest. It's about 1.2 acre. It's the University, Cunningham, just kind of northeast of the bank.
Yep.
The median extends on Cunningham extends north, and that has presented a challenge. And it's presented a challenge to a couple of the probably most promising prospects that we have for that outlot. It's not insurmountable, but it's quite significant. I would say the outlots have and continue to see considerable interest, and we think we can't make this thing happen. Economic conditions are not prime for retail development right now. It's just the way it is. And we understand that risk, and we're moving forward with it as quickly as we can. I would also say, we've had to tell one or two no, because we didn't think it represented the quality that was key to this being the gateway to Urbana. And in fact, there's been a name or two thrown about that we just didn't feel like it was going to bring the quality of construction and things that we have been willing to say we're not in a position to sell. Nothing personal, but we just don't feel like this is what Urbana has in mind. It's not what we quite had in mind, and we're willing to, put our dollars where our mouth is in that regard.
Yeah, well, that I do appreciate. I think we'd like to see more of the people mentioned Monocle's or Applebee's or things, more of that and less of the Burger King in terms of just the quality of Urbana. I think you feel the same way. Your name's going to be on the project. My last question is about the options, hotel versus inline shops. I know this development agreement draft presents the three different options about how much square footage is allotted to all of those. Do you have, a hotel developer you're already working with? Is the hotel option one that really you're planning to do, or are you still truly undecided in which way this is going to go, or do you have inline shop tenants that you're already working with that are ready if you build the inline shop portion? I know that building that we saw before, the rendering Dennis mentioned, was really attractive, and that inline shop concept is one that a lot of us really like and think might make more sense than hotel. I know the constituents I represent want retail in downtown. They want to be able to go and buy something, and to them, hotel doesn't quite count as retail. Their family and friends could come and stay at the hotel, and that's some benefit, but the sort of highest and best use in terms of what the citizens desire, I think, is retail where they can go shop and buy quality things. So from your perspective, which of those options are you leaning towards? Do you have tenants, or partners you're working with for both, and could it really go either way? And how's that decision going to be made over the next few months?
Okay. It's really good questions. Our intention, well, first of all, hotel was always contemplated as an 80%. So if you go back to the original agreement, hotel is in there explicitly as 80%.
a piece, yeah.
It wasn't part of the definition of retail. It was explicitly considered separately at 80%. So that wasn't a change as far as we're aware. The intention, Plan A is 2 separate buildings, retail of approximately 15,000 square feet apiece in the inline portion, Lot 100. We have had, and we have letters of intent from a number of retailers. We're not to the point where we're quite able to pull the trigger on the first of those 2 buildings in the back.
Okay.
But we certainly do have a number of letters of intent, 2 contracts, and, so we need a couple more letters of intent from retailers. This discussion of hotel versus retail really came out in the kinds of uses that would really make a lot of sense at that corner. We had throughout the conversations with all potential users, we came across our real estate broker, Vance Barr, came across quite a few potential hotel users who also thought that was an appropriate corner. But because it's proximity to the university, because it's proximity to the hospitals, they found that attractive. So what we didn't want to do in this discussion, knowing that we would all like to see this developed as quickly and as successfully as possible, is allow some flexibility as to how that plays out. So, if I were to guess, I would say, certainly we're going to do 1 retail building in the back, with a high degree of certainty would be my expectation. A possibility of the other retail building becomes a hotel. So it's a combination of retail and hotel, which reinforces one another and is positive. I would say it's a very remote possibility that it's purely hotel.
Remote.
And we were in the discussions, in the context of the discussions, we said, well, what happens if we get a hotel person and they want a conference center with a restaurant, and how do we handle that without having to go back to the drawing board and delay discussions and negotiations? And so the thought was, okay, well, here's our 3 scenarios. The original kind of Plan A, 2 buildings of retail, a Plan B, 1 building of retail, 1 hotel, and a Plan C, just in case, is pure hotel, though we think that's very unlikely.
Okay.
That answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. That
Okay.
really helps.
Well, I've already stopped at the credit union because, yes, I've been waiting for 12 years actually for that for the credit union, employees credit union of the university, to come into our town. So I celebrate that with an open heart. I'll tell you, great location, and I think they were smart to make the move. It does seem that surprisingly, it's somewhat hard to get into the location from coming from the south on Vine, because you're coming up and then you're entering the intersection at University and Vine, and then you have that median barrier, and so I guess I have questions about the access. Obviously, you put in the infrastructure for the interior streets, but the connectivity seems to be important to develop at the Broadway location, where we have a light we can turn into the district or the gateway area shops. But for people who are going northbound and passing on the east side of the gateway shops, there's not an easy way to turn around. You have to go into a parking lot of a neighboring business to make a U-turn to come back into the entrance. So I guess maybe this is also
That's because you have to
staff.
go west on University and turn in halfway down the block.
Yeah, you have to learn how to figure that out. So I know that there's a northern access, but it connects to a city street, a residential street. Is there? I guess maybe this is more for staff. I'm wondering about how that connectivity is going to be improved. Are we going to probably see a lot of traffic on the street that's just north of this shopping district?
So I think you're referring to Crystal Lake Drive.
Yeah, Crystal Lake Drive.
Certainly, we've done absolutely everything we could to, we even approached IDOT at one point about shortening the median because that would have been, I think, in everybody's best interest, but that's not something that they were willing to contemplate.
I see.
We've got the access from the east side coming south off Cunningham. We've got the access from Crystal Lake Drive coming south into the development. We've got access going north from, if you're coming west on University, you can get in that way. And frankly, if you're going on Vine, and part of this is, if you look at many redevelopments, everybody has challenges like this. And, we're convinced, and, the people that are excited to be there with us are convinced that those issues eventually, you figure it out and you find your way that is most comfortable for you and you go there. But if you're going north on Vine, typically we would expect people to turn west on University and then go just to the west of the credit union. And then, of course, coming from the west is fairly easy because of the intersection at Broadway.
At Broadway.
Right. So, we accept and have done everything we can, I think. And frankly, the outlot number 4 has been where that challenge has been presented itself most significantly.
And then one final question for me is, in general, when this project first came forward, we felt that there was like an overview of design. There was like a kind of a unit look somewhat, or at least a certain standard of construction material, et cetera, that was an important part of the concept. And I even felt that there was certain signage kinds of continuity that were being established. Are you still holding, as an example or forward, some of these standards for the development that are going to be taking place, even though you're not personally going to be building the buildings?
Nothing has changed in terms of, what we put forth and what we've discussed with you were signage, in particular pertaining to the inline shops.
Yes.
And so, in terms of signage requirements, in terms of quality of materials, in terms of what we expect to be built and what we have presented in the past, nothing has changed. So, we feel like we've really didn't discuss that item because it wasn't, it wasn't something that was changing as a part of this agreement.
Well, part of my interest is that if we have a corporation that has their own corporate look, who wants to build on an outlot right there along University Avenue, will we indeed get exactly what the corporate look looks like, or will we be able to have a look that incorporates the standards of the Gateway Center shopping center rather than the major corporate look? In other words, I wonder how much control we have of, for the sale of those lots if they are sold to corporations that, must have red or bright green paneled, plastic facades, and certain kinds of window treatments or whatever. So I guess this is going to be out of our hands.
I think it's under our control to the same extent that it was under our control under the previous agreement. There are some issues there certainly that need to be addressed, all of which would fall under zoning rules as far as I understand. But make no mistake about it, when we think about and talk to potential purchasers of these outlots, one of our principal criteria is how is this going to impact the inline and the overall look of this center? Because our fortunes are tied to the inline center.
That's right.
Not, once the outlot is sold, they have to follow the criteria we set forth, but then that's their land, and, we need to make sure and are going to do everything we reasonably can to make sure that that outlot is developed in such a way that supports the overall development, because, it's in our every incentive, as well as, as far as the impression this development leaves, people aren't going to say, oh, well, we're not worried about that outlot because we know they sold it to somebody. As far as the public's concerned, this entire development is something that is being attributed to us, and, we take that seriously.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions for the developers? Go ahead, Charlie.
You talk about this being a $10 to $12 million development, yet in our numbers it says it's a $7.5 million project. So, well, their part is, the market value of the project is $7.5 million, and yet earlier you said it was a $10 to $12 million investment here.
Right.
So that doesn't make sense,
Well, what doesn't make sense is, I think it's standard operating procedure. I won't put words in the mouth of the staff, but staff typically is going to give you very conservative numbers. I can guarantee you that we knew from day one that this project was not going to be the 7.5, I'm sorry, it was 7 million in the initial agreement. We knew it was going to be much more than that, just like we know that the back is going to be much more than the 3.5 that's currently contemplated. So those are just very conservative numbers.
And coupled with that, some of the numbers that we used were also permit construction numbers, which are not always accurately reflective of actual construction costs. And there's also some assumptions by the assessor. When assessing a property, you assume that it has some things in place already. For example, the assessor will assume that a building has certain things available to it that don't necessarily get assessed as value to the property. So again, while the estimated infrastructure cost may be higher than what we've estimated, that's what we're estimating the assessment will be.
Okay. And then, getting back to my original question, which is a rebate on property that you no longer own, which is, the front half of the property. You're selling it off, though granted you have developed it. Wouldn't you recoup your development costs as part of the sale of the property, and then no rebate would be required?
Well, when we contemplate the sale price of those outlots, the rebate is part of what we incorporate into that. So, the way we've negotiated this deal is we go in, we take the risk from scratch, we develop it, do the site work, hold it for sale, try to find the right purchaser, have it pad ready for them to go as soon as they're ready to go. As far as we're concerned, the risk that we've undertaken more than justifies any associated rebate of that property.
Would you say that the potential rebate that you get will be a form of guarantee on a quality project on those outlots?
I would say it's already been. I mean, the $2 million that we put in so far could not have been put in if we didn't have a partner in the city of Urbana like we've gotten. I guess I'd use as evidence the quality of the employee credit union's building, and the type of construction, type of materials that are put forth there are consistent with, and that's why they're there, because it's consistent with what we think is a quality development, the gateway of Urbana.
Is it possible that could be in the development agreement? I mean, could we just say no fast food in the outlots as part of the development agreement, if that's what is already being guaranteed? Is there, I mean, in some ways we lose, someone comes to you, they want to purchase, they don't always tell you what usually they have an intermediary. So Walmart had an intermediary buy the land. McDonald's usually has an intermediary, and you don't actually know what is going to happen at that corner. You're selling to a business that then turns that property over to another business. So how is it that given that you're not developing the outlots yourself and you're selling them, how can you really guarantee what is going to be at those properties, given that you'll be, possibly brokering with this intermediary real estate company that's kind of blocking the content from you, so to speak?
We would never sell unless we knew exactly who and for what. And we've run into that. I mean, there certainly are preferred developers for different uses, as you know, but we would not sell to someone who's not committing to a specific. We have a responsibility, and we have the land behind it. So there's just no way that we're going to sell to somebody and say, well, as long as you pay the price, we don't care. It's just not the approach that we're comfortable with. And, we would never sell without knowing what they're building, and we approve their design.
You do?
Yes, we
You
do
do
approve their design.
Okay, that's a huge.
That's part of our contract.
So including their signage and what they're putting there, is that you have to approve their design to fit with the
Everything.
overall development?
Their location on the
Okay,
site.
so there is a kind of site control,
size.
it's just in the hands of, because I wasn't concerned when you were developing the lot. I'm concerned with the sale of the lot and other folks developing it and what would happen with site control with that.
We have, total control, I would say.
Okay.
Heather?
I just had a comment, and my comment was, you hit the nail on the head. They have an investment here that they want to protect, and they're going to do everything they can to protect it by getting quality businesses in there, and they're not going to bite their nose to spite their face by just letting a Burger King go up if that's not going to protect their investment.
Burger King lovers out there, beware. Dennis?
Okay, well, actually, even though it seemed like that was an aside, that's an important statement to hear from you, which we weren't clear upon, and therefore concern has to occur because, after all, this is an important site for the city of Urbana, and we want it to look right, and when we feel like we're losing the ability to govern what that amounts to, it makes us very worried. Just as, I guess, for my information, it's indicated in the report that you had to create an engineering bearing along one corner near the Broadway. Is that correct? That there was
Engineered barrier.
An engineered barrier. And was that to retain water from coming or not coming onto the property, or was what was the purpose of that?
So this is in the corner of the Broadway University corner.
Yes.
So if you're standing at that intersection, our development's in the northeast corner. It's right in that corner. You've probably seen it. It looks like an asphalt. It's basically asphalt. That was a requirement by the Illinois EPA. To place an engineered barrier between the surface and the soil, because there had been small remnants from a oil spill that happened across the street many years ago on the other side of Broadway, and that had the plume had expanded into portion of our site. And so, we want our site to be completely free of any issues like that, and so we went to the IEPA, got that issue addressed, and now have a NFR letter, a no further remediation, which says basically we've taken care of all issues associated with that topic, and that was a requirement to make sure that we did that.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
I just have one additional question with the CAV issue, because I'm not totally understanding it, which is, if the 80% is based on the increment, tax increment, from what it was, which in the development agreement is about $800,000, to what it will be, there's this big unknown because the EAV, the base EAV, from which the increment is calculated, might be quite different. And it's unclear it might be quite different in the revised agreement, and it might be quite lower if we're going with, I don't know, we have to check. So in some ways, I guess I'm concerned that as we're calculating the financials of this, I don't see us taking into consideration that the dollar increment has to be based on what that base EAV is. And in this case, it's a floating EAV, and I don't understand how we can really get a good financial projection on the return on investment with a floating EAV. So that's one piece I'm not understanding that if you could clarify would help.
The credit union property does not have a base EAV at this point because the credit union property did not exist at the creation of the TIF. So we're waiting for the assessor to tell us what the base EAV is for the credit union property. And that will be a portion of that 810. We just don't know how much. And the number might vary a little bit because of the Park District property, again, which had no value, and the part of the private development site that already had value that now does not because it's owned by the Park District from that land swap. So basically, the credit union property right now has no base EAV. We don't know what that's going to be yet until the assessor calculates that. And they will tell us the base EAV for the credit union property is X.
For 2007,
For the base year. They're
for
going to
1986.
Correct. They're going to
Okay.
tell us in 1986 that property owned by the credit union, which was not owned by the credit union in 1986, had X value. They will also tell us in 2007, when they do the assessment for the credit union property, your value is now this. So they're going to set both the base
Yeah.
and the current assessed value for us.
But what's the recalculated annually then? Because it sounded like it would be recalculated.
It won't, maybe I misspoke when I said it'll be recalculated annually. It'll be recalculated once. If in the future the credit union property were to be further subdivided, we would then rely on the assessor to recalculate the base again for us.
Okay.
But once they calculate it once, it won't need to be recalculated until the credit union property is either further subdivided or becomes part of a larger parcel. Then it will need to be recalculated.
So it's not possible that the base EAV under the new redevelopment agreement would go down such that the increment, the 80% increment, expands significantly as a result of it. That's I guess the fear that doesn't make sense why we would do that.
Perhaps, maybe to better explain, the 810 is still out there. It just needs to be reassigned to all the parcels
different
properly.
pieces.
And it may change a little bit, again, because the Park District property had no value.
Okay.
So
Understood.
that 810 will need to change a little bit.
Okay.
But really, the crux is it needs to be reassigned.
Okay.
And
that
we were thinking
clarifies.
maybe we could do that on a square footage basis. And again, our special counsel said, let's not worry about it. Let's let the assessor tell us what that's going to be. So that's why it's written as such.
Okay. I think, and we can take final comments and let's take a vote, but I think that given the site control, given the EAV issue, I think next week we should see financials that actually look at those upper and lower limits because we're kind of doing a best case scenario, and I actually think we need to see the whole picture. What's the worst case scenario? What's the very best case scenario? And see those financials. And if we could get those for next week, I feel more comfortable moving forward with this project.
The worst case scenario being just what's dictated in the development agreement?
Yeah, like if
Not including outlots?
Yeah, if what's dictated in the development agreement, if that's successful, so not assuming that we would null and void that agreement, what would happen? And then what's kind of the best case scenario, and what would the city get, and what would the developer get over that period of time? And what if they started to build tomorrow, or this year, and get 14 years of TIF increment versus what would happen,
Sure.
if they wouldn't. So it would just help to see that financial picture a little bit more
Sure.
detail.
Okay, I can try to put that together.
Okay, thanks. Other folks? Okay. We have a motion and a second to send this council with recommendation for approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Next, we have ordinance number 2008-02-007, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for gateway shops. This is related to the last item. We have a motion from Heather, a second from Robert. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. Next, we have a motion authorizing the mayor to execute a real estate option and contract for property located at 302 West Springfield Avenue. This is Allman's Auto Repair. And we'll hear from Community Development. Go ahead, Tom.
You have before you a real estate option and contract for 302 West Springfield, also known as the Allman's Auto Repair. In March 2007 and again in October 2007, City Council entered into a real estate option and contract. This is basically an extension of that option, although technically it is a brand-new option. It really, in reality, is just an extension of that option. The city is continuing environmental testing on site. We are working with neighboring property owners to see if we can do some land assemblage, and we're also working with potential developers to make sure that there's a developer interested in the project. Working through all this, we have not been able to do that through the expiration of this most recent contract. We've requested an extension. The cost of extending the option has been credited to the city in the form of the purchase price being reduced by the amount of the extension. So if the city moves forward and does close on the property, the cost of this extension would be incorporated into that purchase price.
Move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
We have a motion from Charlie and a second from Robert. Brandon?
Yeah, Tom, my only question is about the timeline. This lets us go through July, but is that enough? I know we've already had 2 extensions or maybe 3, and I with the environmental and the difficulty, do you feel like it's going to get wrapped up and there's a solution on the horizon?
I think the real crux is working with neighboring property owners in that this site has marginal development potential on its own. And so the question is, would we even engage in environmental remediation if this site on its own is not developable? So the real crux is to work with a developer to ensure that we've got a viable development project and work with neighboring property owners. And the environmental are issues that we can work through.
Okay. And would we, if we couldn't work with neighboring property owners, would we buy this property first, remediate it, and then wait for other surrounding properties to become part of a big enough project, or?
We theoretically could, but that would certainly increase our risk.
Yeah.
In that nothing would be guaranteed on neighboring properties. So there is a cost associated with environmental remediation, and that cost is justified if we can assemble land and get a viable development project. Because this site is not necessarily a viable development project on its own, the question is, do we want to invest, purchase the property, and maybe not get a development project out of it?
Right. Okay. Thanks.
I'm curious to know, well, I had the same question that Brenda did, whether this extension should go farther into December or something if it took that long. But you're saying no, perhaps not.
The length of this option was at the property owner's request.
Okay.
We would have liked to extend longer, but this time period was at the property owner's request.
Is there a potential that if the city doesn't maintain interest or bring forward some kind of a developmental plan, that the property owner is going to be disinterested and take his property elsewhere?
We have, based on this document, we have through mid-July, we have a guarantee with the current property owner through mid-July that he will sell the property to us. If at the end of that time we still have not come to an agreement, theoretically he could opt to sell the land to someone else.
And I got one more question. If it was possible to develop a 5-story department store on the very same footprint, what is keeping us from successfully developing something or anything on this footprint?
The answer to that question is the former 5-story building. The problem with the property is it was not demolished properly. There's a lot of subsurface rubble, and it would be impossible without extensive site work to build a foundation that could support a building on that site. So the answer to the question is the former building is our problem in that it wasn't demolished properly, and that's created problems for environmental testing. When drilling for samples, when you hit voids under the ground or you hit rubble, you can't get a viable environmental sample because there's nothing to draw out. So that's what's complicated our environmental testing, and it also complicates the viability of the development project in that you'd have to get into engineered caissons to support a building, and it makes it financially not feasible on its own.
But wouldn't a development that included a good basement excavation handle most of the possible excavation that would be required for a site like that?
Yes, but the fact that market conditions have changed since the original building means that most developers would not be interested in doing a building on that site of that size because tenants have new needs than they did years ago. So a building the same size as what was previously there might not be as marketable because tenants are more demanding. So to dig out a basement on that site to build a building that was there exactly as it was before would be very expensive and might not be marketable.
Even if it provided parking in a sub parking level?
Because of the shape of that parcel, subsurface parking would be a challenge. Drive aisles would be very difficult because of the triangular shape.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a challenge.
All right.
It's a great location. We'll drive the cars underground. Any other questions? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. Thank you, Tom. I'll take you off the hot seat. Ordinance number 2007-10-115, an ordinance amending Chapter 26 of the Code of Ordinances. This refers to vehicles for hire, and we'll hear from Ron O'Neill, our city attorney.
Thank you. If you all recall, some time ago, I brought this before you, and we had to delay it or defer it, whichever word you want to use, because we have the same ordinance essentially that Champaign has. We work cooperatively because obviously taxi drivers are going to be going back and forth. Vehicles for hire are going to be going back and forth between the cities. So we had to make sure that our language matched theirs, and they chose to make some changes. So we had to go back to the drawing board. The ordinance you have before you is essentially amended only to reflect that there is a classification of vehicle that is becoming commonplace that we were not regulating, and that's called a public transport vehicle. Those are the big vans, you know, they carry 15 people, and, you know, they carry 10 or more people and weigh more than 10,000 pounds. So that's essentially all we did with this ordinance, is just tried to treat all of the vehicles for hire somewhat equally and change the language so that they'll all be regulated much the same way.
I'd like to recommend that we move forward with this at the next council.
I have a motion from Lynn, a second from Charlie. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. Next, we have a motion to approve joining the Sister City program to establish a sister city relationship with the city of Zamba, Malawi, Africa. And this will be from the mayor's office.
Liz Davis has done the work on this, and there were some questions. I think Heather had a concern about how much it was going to cost. So Liz has done a good job on this, and I've asked her that if you approve this, that she would be our coordinator. Does that involve a trip to Malawi? It might. I don't know.
You have in your council packets an overview of the program of Sister Cities, as well as recommendations for best practices if you choose to move forward with that. Councilman Roberts has worked to establish relationships in Malawi and Zamba, and because of that, the city of Urbana will receive a 50% discount for the first year of our dues. And on their side, Zamba, they are considered global members, whereas U.S. members, they have a prorated system for how they establish dues, but because Zamba is considered a global member, their dues are set, and they are at $140 per year.
Charlie and then Lynn.
Liz, thank you. In terms of, I know one of the recommendations here is to set up a community committee that is involved in this. Have you touched base with the Rotary Club and the First Presbyterian Church yet?
Not yet. I've just been in the information gathering stage at this point.
Okay. In terms of how you think about this, if you're going to coordinate this, you know, can you envision such a committee and how you might go about working together with Dennis and the Rotary Club and others that are interested?
Well, Councilman Roberts has informed me that the Presbyterian Church here in town, they already have an existing relationship with Malawi, and there are some U of I faculty members who are from that country. So we could start at that point and then sort of expand outward. And looking at other model programs, they involve the business community, social service organizations, schools, a wide variety of organizations that we could encompass and make this really a community-wide effort. So there's a lot of potential. And it seems like, once we get the ball rolling, we could definitely disseminate information quickly.
Thank you.
It was Lynn and then Dennis.
Do you anticipate how much staff time the relationship would or could take?
That would probably depend on how much of a relationship you would want to establish. Would you want this to be a priority? Would you want this to be sort of a second-tier priority? I would say that would depend on what your leadership would say.
Right. I actually had a conversation today with Rita Brood, and she is the North Illinois coordinator for Sister Cities International. So there are actually two different individuals here in the state of Illinois who are trained liaisons for the Sister City organization. And she lives in the Tinley Park in the South Chicago area. And her district is from northern Illinois down to the Springfield area, so she said that definitely that we would be in her area. She offers any assistance that we might need. She said she's only about an hour and a half away, and she could come down and talk to us if necessary. She wanted to know if we had all the information that was possible that we might need to start out, and I told her that we did have a packet, that was sent from the national office, so we have everything. She invited us, if we pursue this plan, to come to the first Midwest Regional Conference for Sister City organizations. It's going to take place in Palatine, Illinois, and I don't honestly know where that is. I think it's a suburb, but I'm not sure where.
It's by Schaumburg.
Near Schaumburg. Okay, thank you. And it's going to be in April 18th and 19th. There is a small fee for attendance, but we'll be getting a packet or like a brochure for that conference soon. So it might be a worthwhile thing to have, maybe a staff person or one or two people go to the conference and get a lot of answers. And also, I got 4 letters of support from the community. None of them were able to come tonight, but I'd like to just briefly read these letters to you. I mean, I think it's one thing that I'm interested, but I think we should prove that also the community is interested as well. I got a letter from Jim Loker. He's a coordinator at the First Presbyterian Church, and he sent us a letter saying that he's supporting the initiative being considered by the City Council. The basis support comes from our existing experiences with the partnership that we've developed with the Sister City Church in Demasi, which is about 12 miles from Zomba. He says, opening a pathway of communication and sharing through the Sister City relationship is a way to let others know that we do care and for us to learn how to be more aware and effective as a global family member. Also, David Kay, who is a coordinator at the First Presbyterian Church, says, I'm sorry that our demands prevent me from appearing tonight, but a Sister City relationship with Zomba would benefit both communities. Our friends from Malawi have learned how to make creative use of limited resources, and a Sister City partnership would give both sides the opportunity to learn from each other. Moreover, as you know, a very modest kinds of assistance by American standards can have major impact in a Malawian context. Carl Alstetter and his wife also support the Sister City relationship. He's a retired professor at the university. He says Zomba and Urbana have a common advantage of having a university campus that is highly ranked nationally. English is widely spoken, and there are people of learning, culture, and world experience in both cities. The start that you have made will be reinforced by having members of the Urbana residents living there, which are the Mason family, at least for a start, and the continued practice of the First Presbyterian Church of Urbana to program with in opportunities in that community. And finally, I'd like to read a letter. This is kind of more important, I think. I finally was able to connect with Ezekiel Kalapani, and he is in the Department of Geography, a PhD, a professor, a PhD, working in the Department of Geology. And he tells me, thanks a lot for your sharing this important information with me. I just got your letter on my in my email. I am currently in Chicago at a conference at the University of I in Chicago, so that I will not be able to make the 9 o'clock or the meeting tonight. He says that 4 colleagues of him and himself are about to embark on a 3-year project of research in Malawi in the community of Mongochi, which is about 30 miles north of Zomba, examining the relationship between traditional male circumcision and HIV, and that we are going to be leaving for Malawi on March 12th, returning March 30th. I won't, he says, the reason for writing this note is to express my total support for this project. My family and I lived in Zomba from 1975 to 1988, and we fell in love with this beautiful town at the foot of the majestic Zomba Plateau. Without a doubt, the benefits will be many for both the Urbana City Council as well as the Zomba municipality. I wish that I was at the meeting tonight to talk a little bit, but take this note as an expression of my unwavering support for this venture. Many thanks for getting in touch, and I wish you an excellent and successful deliberation tonight. If there is anything that you wish me to do while I am in Malawi on behalf of this project, please do not hesitate to get in touch. So I think that's very supportive to know that we also have a professor on the campus who's ready to start a 3-year project. I think also that your report was included a lot of savvy advice, and one of the things that Rita Brood indicated to me is that if we make up a formal declaration of negotiation or some kind of a formal contract, that it be clearly spelled out what kinds of financial obligations the city is willing to take on when it comes time to have interactive programs with our community in Africa, so that if there are travel plans, it is known ahead of time who will be responsible for covering them and who will be responsible for covering possible shipping charges or other kinds of expenses that might occur. And of course, in America, we could be very generous and support a lot of programs. But she also said that they're establishing in the Sister City organization what they call the African Classroom Interaction Program. And this is one in which teachers are able to prepare lesson plans and to access similar groups in African countries to have immediate interactive teaching experiences between classrooms in Africa and the United States through the internet.
Lynn?
I don't make a very good wet blanket, but I guess therein lies the concern for me in terms of just expense. And I think if you're going to do something like this, you really ought to do it. You know, or else I know that the mayor said a few years ago, many years ago, I think we had a sister city, but it just kind of wavered and went away. And I think that could be at risk. I frankly am not an advocate for us to spend significant staff time or of our budget at this point. For us to have a relationship that would be meaningful and not cost us anything, heck, can't say anything bad about that, but I think you almost have to invest to make it more meaningful, and that is my concern. So again, Sister City sounds all good, but you know, in terms of prioritization of staff time, which we've heard has been sometimes can be at a difficult thing, I think it's something for us to at least think about.
Just, Dennis, since you spoke at length, I'd like to give other people a chance to speak who wanted to speak. So Charlie and then Brandon.
I'd like to put Libby on the spot here if she has some informal information from Rotary Club, because they're another component in all of this.
Back in the hot seat.
Sorry, Libby.
I just did announce the committee discussion on Zomba to Urbana Rotary and didn't get a formal response, but they seemed excited by the initiative, and a lot of the clubs supported the shallow well project there. So it's definitely a tie-in, and I'd be happy to report back again tomorrow or next Tuesday.
Okay, Brandon?
I guess I want to briefly explain my support and my concern with the whole thing, and then let Dennis answer and explain. This is a very exciting exchange, and I agree with all the people who wrote those letters that, wow, it's really neat, the possibility of students in schools, exchanging artwork and letters with each other and having this kind of dialogue. And my concern is how we make it happen and the exact commitments. The document lays out a lot of commitments for the mayor, for city staff, for council members, and I personally have a big list of 10 or 12 other city issues that I put my energy into on a weekly basis, and I don't know that this is one I'm ready to take on and personally add to the things that I'm going to make happen after we sign up and fill out the initial paperwork. Who's going to make it happen on a weekly basis that this dialogue goes forward, that people exchange these things, that we really do benefit in all these rich ways which are exciting. And so for me personally, that is, I think, where my energy will go. Dennis, if that's one thing that you want to work on and where your energy will go, I'm willing to support that. If you or if we see other people in the community like the Rotary who, by us approving this and putting our official stamp on it, will take this much farther than we could even imagine, that would be wonderful. I also feel like Lynn did that. I'm not ready to say we should put this at the top of the list of Liz's time, which is very precious and busy. I know upstairs here we're incredibly busy, or the mayor's time. That some of the roles in here were really for the mayor to do things. It's changing annual state of the city letters, of being honorary chairs of things, and the mayor is so busy as well with so many of our city priorities that for her to kind of be the person who drives it is a concern I have. But if it's us putting our seal of approval on it and setting up this relationship so that the community, or you, Dennis, or others can take this much farther than we would have imagined, then I'm supportive. The cost is really minimal. If we sell a few more calendars, 10 or 12 more calendars or something, to pay the cost, right? I mean, the cost is not my concern, but the time and the commitment and who takes it and runs with it. So you'll have a chance, I know, to answer that, and others may as well.
The mayor, and then folks who haven't spoken, and then we can hear from Lynn and Dennis.
Yeah, I think the fact that we have an organization like Sister Cities that has been through all this and can give us step by step, I don't envision this, dominating Liz's whole day or anything. And I think we involve the schools, and it really is that this city does have connections to the rest of the world, and I think it's good to have people-to-people kind of connection instead of just reading about things in the News Gazette or the Chicago Tribune. And I think you really do learn things that you would never learn just by reading or watching 60 Minutes or something.
Just a comment on this, and then we'll hear comments from additional folks, which is my ideal would be that we form the committee and we have the committee come to the city with a plan of what the sister city relationship would look like. Meaning, we form the committee, meaning that the committee forms itself. So the Rotary Club and the Presbyterian Church and Dennis and the professor on campus and anyone else who wants to participate, do the work to show the investment, the grassroots investment in this first before the city commits any funds. And also to ask Malawi if they would like, if they'll pay the $140, and if they won't, then maybe it shouldn't be a governmental thing through the Sister City program. So I'd like to see, do it. There's nothing, the city isn't in the way of having this happen. And then if the city's input through the Sister City program allows there to be a service that helps to connect these two communities in a greater way, then I think it's a small fee, and we could look at if people want to, if council members or the mayor want to travel, can we use the existing conference money and not make an additional allocation or line item for this? And also, can we invite Malawi artists to participate in our public arts program and submit proposals. I mean, are there ways in which we're currently doing things where we're asking for international input, the public arts program being one example that where we will be hopefully in the future doing that. So it could be very fruitful, but I'm concerned about making a new thing. It really needs to be folded into the existing things, and it needs to be held up by the grassroots. If the grassroots came to us and said, we formed the committee, this is the kind of things we'd like to do, the activities that we are committing to do, which is beyond writing a letter to council, then I think I would support the funding for that for a year. And then after a year, we'd look and see, did they actually do those things? You know, should we continue this relationship? So I don't want to be stuck in a situation where we're saying we're going to do this and there isn't really a body of people who are supporting it. Last thing is, I agree with what Dennis said. This could sound like, to this community, the Zomba community, rich U.S. city would like to become your friend, and we're not being clear about what that means, but Zomba thinks that maybe that this will be an opportunity to have funding come to Zomba. And I think it should be really clear that that's not the relationship that we're looking to set up. And that expectation, you have to say it explicitly. I just got back, I was in Kenya a year ago, and we had a long issue with this. You have to be really explicit and say, what are those arrangements and what are the relationships? And I do think that if they want to be part of the Sister City program, that they should be expending some funding so that there's buy-in from their end too. So I guess that's how I'd like to see this go, is let's make the committee happen. We don't need to do anything. Let's really see people's commitments in terms of time that they're going to put into it. And once we see that from the community, then we can decide what kind of investment we'd like to make in terms of staff and our budget. Lynn had her hand up, and Dennis also had his hand up.
I'll pass at this point.
Dennis.
Well, I just heard about 4 really good essays looking at the glass half empty. I'd like to look at this as a project where the glass is half filled. We already have 3 or 4 community groups on their own for the last 10 years, some for the last year and a half, interacting with this community. I personally met with not only the Prime Minister, the Minister of Parliament of this community, personally in Lilongwe, the capital city, but I also met past graduates of the U of I who are Malawian residents, returned to their country and who live in the capital city, including one gentleman who is working right now at the U.S. Embassy at the capital city, who all are eager and supportive of this interaction. I have established good contacts at the University of Malawi through the Chancellor's Library, the Director of the Chancellor's Library. And I have now established a contact with the Chief Executive of the municipality of Zomba, all of them eager and interested to exchange culture and friendship with our country. But we seem to be concerned whether it costs $143 to have them participate with us, and whether that's worth it for us. You know, many of the programs, the programs that I envision happening can all be done basically at no cost because they're cultural human interchanges. It doesn't mean that we're going to now try to send tractors to Malawi. We are merely interested in interacting with these people on a cultural basis. Yes, through exchange of art, exchange of letters, classrooms having pen pals in a foreign country. Very simple, inexpensive, with very little heavy obligation and output. Now, who's going to help coordinate this? Well, we already have people who are coordinating events already, so we're just going to piggyback on existing structures. I certainly am not going to stop sending books or interacting by email with my friends in Malawi. The Presbyterian Church is probably going to send people in about another year or 2 years. We had just found out that there's a professor who's about to do a three-year study, and he's a Malawi native who's a professor here at the University of Illinois. I think we don't have to I don't think it's necessary to say we have to have a brand new committee to carry out the cultural exchange of the vision of our program. I think we merely need to encourage those people who are already participating in it to continue and perhaps report back to us. And of course, we would like to expand the pool of interaction to the school system. One project that was brought up to me in a phone conversation today was that people who work at hospitals or hospitals can share excess metal equipment that isn't being used or isn't completely used, and in America it might be thrown away, but in foreign countries would be very valuable to receive, and that there are programs that Sister Cities International sponsors to recycle medical supplies, and that doesn't cost anything because these would be thrown away. There might be shipping occasionally once a year. So I don't know. I think that a lot of the programs that we would be starting would not require constant attention. If anything, there might be a quarterly report. Every 3 or 4 months, there might be a report on how things are going or what has evolved. Maybe it would be twice a year. But
Dennis, is it possible you could get, usually council members speak for 5 minutes?
Okay.
And by ordinance, so if we could wrap it up, we don't have a motion on the table, so we need to move on.
Well, anyway, I mean, you can tell that I'm a proponent of it. I think that we have in place a volunteer network, and I think we should look at it from a positive perspective rather than how it's a pain to carry forth. Okay.
There's not a motion on the table yet, so it would be useful to get some clarification about what kind of action we're being asked to take this evening.
I could make a motion then. Shall I?
You're welcome to do that. Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to move that the City of Urbana decides to go forward and actually files the application for a sister city relationship with Malawi, and draws up a clear and rather precise statement of what its intent is in the interaction that we establish, and to have a meeting of those people who in the community already support our interrelationship with Malawi, so that we can formalize a structure which the city can use to go forward with this interaction. And that we offer this to the municipality of Malawi, and if we choose to do it in a rather prompt time, we may be able to ask Dr. Ezekiel Nakalapeni to deliver the statement to us, to the municipality of Zomba in person, since he's going to be within an hour's drive.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Dennis, a second from Charlie. Just to be clear, the motion is to join the Sister City program, draft a plan, laying out what we mean by that, by the partnership, to initiate a meeting with the people in the community who are involved, open to the public, and to make a formal offer of Sister City relationship to Zomba, I believe is what you meant to say. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Charlie, you can speak to it then.
I think the important piece for me here is the community buy-in, so that it's part, and I think Danielle was absolutely right that it should be part of our existing, a number of our existing programs, because that way we leverage what we've got and we don't add to fairly thinly spread out staff and so on. And it should be a community grassroots effort, because that's what was missing in the last sister city that I saw us get involved in. It just sort of, as soon as the teachers got disinterested, the program fell by the wayside. In this case, we've got somebody like Don Mason, who's going to be headquartered in Malawi for 2 years. And I think he's a key component in any community organizing that you do. My question for you, Dennis, is can you have this ready for council next week?
I can give my effort.
Lynn, you've been patient. Go ahead.
I guess I still would not favor the motion, just simply because it's not clear to me what the expense to the city is going to be. And I think it's not the $125 or even $500. That's not it. What it is thinking going forward, because there's no initiative that comes free. As long as our staff is involved, that costs us time. So I think, Danielle, your suggestion with regard to the community coming to us, then we supporting it by spending the $500, that'd be great. But then it would be something that would be community-driven. We would simply be an adjunctive support. I would be supportive of that, but I would not be supportive of us being the driver, and therefore the potential added expense to our staff.
Any other comments? Charlie?
But I think that's much of what Dennis's motion is geared to. It's the draft plan, working with other people in the community. If anything, we're piggybacking on with other people in the community, and so I don't envision this as a high staff time, high cost item, but one where we can spread the load out in the community and essentially take advantage of what's in the community. I wouldn't support it otherwise.
Brandon?
Well, yeah, let me clarify that and sort of clarify what Dennis said. Part of the motion was the plan, and another part of the motion was the meeting. I'm wondering, Dennis, if you're open to the idea of chairing or trying to call together yourself that meeting, because you really have a lot of these contacts, and if actually one of the outcomes of the meeting can be the plan. In other words, all those stakeholders who have some connection to Malawi who come from the meeting will be the ones to sort of say what the plan is, rather than us asking Liz to go off and create some plan, and she doesn't have these contacts yet kind of thing. Is that okay? Is that a role you're willing to play in calling those people together and helping from them compile sort of the plan they're ready to take?
Well, I could certainly do that, realizing that it may take a while for people to be able to meet because of short notice. I don't think you can see this happening in a week, especially since probably one of the key people who's going to be doing it is leaving for a month, next week or March 12th. But, it's possible to initiate a program and work the plan out in the future. I mean, we don't have to have the plan tomorrow. We just have to have an intent to have the plan in place.
Mayor?
Well, I think the Sister City program has been going on for a number of years, and it's clear they give you specific directions on how to do this. And I thought that the last committee of the whole, you directed us to get some more information on the cost, which we did. And I think there's a clear enough plan here that all you have to do is say we're going to get started on this. And if you want to put in, evaluate it after a year, that would be perfectly fine. But I think you don't just say come back with a plan. I mean, are we going to do this or aren't we going to do it? And if we are going to do it, we'll come back with a plan.
It's my understanding that the motion on the table is that we would do it, and doing it means joining the Sister City program because we can't force them to agree to it, so we need then the reciprocation to come. But we're agreeing now to join the Sister City program, draft a plan with their support, have a meeting of the stakeholders, and make the offer. Those are all together. So the answer to your question, Mayor, is a yes vote would mean yes, we're doing the program for this year, and then we can see what happens next year. Robert? Okay. Any other discussion? It's my understanding that a yes vote is to support the motion to join the Sister City program and pay the $255 to draft a plan and to have a meeting with stakeholders. There's been a suggestion that the stakeholders develop the plan, and to offer the relationship to Zomba.
And who spearheads the effort?
Dennis, can you answer?
I'll act as chief coordinator.
Dennis would spearhead. Charlie?
Just in terms of the process, we don't have a formal ordinance doing this. This is more direction to staff to, I don't know whether any pieces will have to come back to us or whether the money's there.
I don't think this requires an ordinance. You're just spending some money. Now, if we don't have money in the budget, if we can't find $255, we can we can move some money around, is what I would think.
Yeah.
So I don't think it requires an ordinance. I think it's just a motion.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be.
Go ahead. We need to move on. We've got 3 additional proposals, so I'd like to take a vote soon.
Yeah, that's great. And maybe after we agree and this passes, maybe the mayor could make a short proclamation of friendship that could be taken to Malawi, and that would be establish in an official way our connection.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? That carries. Next, we have 3 reports from the mayor, an overview on sustainability, the Illinois American Water rate increase, and Ameren IP rate increase. You want to start with sustainability?
These are all related, as you might notice. I was struck going to the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting that sustainability was really the huge issue that seemed to enter into every discussion. And I did get you some details on the federal law that U.S. Conference of Mayors worked to get through the Congress. The funding is not there yet, but you can see that the intent is to spend $2 billion a year for American cities of over 35,000 population to start on working on this issue. As I pointed out earlier, a city our size would only get $3 per capita, where if you're over $50,000, that would be $6 per capita. I think that's something that needs to be fixed, but the main thing is to at least get an appropriation started, which means we need to lobby our congressional delegation. This was brought up even in the context of historic preservation, that is something that promotes sustainability, because older buildings, it's better to, if they're well constructed, to perhaps retrofit them for energy efficiency rather than tear them down and build something new, which takes a lot more energy. I was struck by the mayor of Huntington Beach when she commented that in California, their standards that they've adopted would require them to remove 37 million cars from the road, but unfortunately they only have 26 million cars. So this gives you an idea of what we're dealing with. And their emissions are growing at 1.5% a year. So one of the proposals for dealing with reducing this growth in carbon dioxide is to charge emission fees or a carbon tax. And we had an economist from Resources for the Future talk about that being probably more effective to encourage new technology, because the pricing is more stable than if you have cap and trade programs. Does anybody know what a cap and trade program is? Well, good. We don't have to discuss that then. Anyway, it's not as good as the carbon tax. And Al Gore has proposed that revenue from a carbon tax could be used to reduce payroll taxes. So there's a lot of discussion going on about how this is going to change the way we do things, and it's going to be tremendously dramatic changes that are going to come as a result of trying to deal with this problem. It was interesting to see that one of the suggestions was to revamp building codes. There's an energy efficiency codes coalition that's pushing for a 30% improvement in 2009 model energy codes. And again, cities play a role because it's our code enforcement officials that go vote on these codes. And the mayor of Albuquerque, who heads up the Mayor's Water Council, pointed out that about half of the water that's used in this country is for energy production. So here, locally, I thought it was interesting that the university is going to combine the natural history, water, geological, and waste management and research surveys into a new Institute for Natural Sciences and Sustainability. And I think that would help us tremendously to have this research going on right here. Along that line, we have a forum that will be held in this room on Wednesday, and the Waste Management and Research Center is one of the co-sponsors, and you can see that we have a huge number of co-sponsors, including Parkland College, and this year their topic that they're discussing is sustainability. So we're going to have 3 speakers: Leslie Cooper Band, John Marlin and Brandon Bowersox. Brandon Bowersox is going to talk about what Urbana is doing. And I thought it was interesting also that in the magazine of the Illinois Municipal League, Urbana is cited for its 30 years as a Tree City USA. And that certainly is one of the main things that cities can do for sustainability, is to encourage planting of trees and care of trees, because trees use carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. So we were called the leading Illinois tree community, which is a nice compliment. Okay, we are dealing with the proposed 60% rate increase from the water company, and I believe that is a clear indication that we need to study all our options. I went to the Chamber of Commerce last Wednesday. Libby was there, and Tom Carino also. And the water company said that the 60% increase does not include the total cost of the new plant west of Champaign. And that yes, there's more to come, and that they will come back, and they want to come back every 2 years and ask for more money. Now, I talked with Ron Eldridge about what is the cost to the customers in Urbana and Champaign, and we came up with an estimate based on the taxes that we levy on the water. Champaign has a little bit lower, so we estimated $8 million for the customers. We're spending $65,000 to go before the Illinois Commerce Commission. We're splitting that with Champaign, Savoy, Sidney, Philo, and St. Joseph. So our share is going to be relatively low. But that's to try to save $8 million a year for the customers. Turns out our estimate was a little low. The water company says it's $9.6 million. So whatever it is, 8, 9.6, whatever, it's a lot of money. And it's something that they're going to keep try to boost every year or every 2 years. So I think that should be looked at as a drain on our local economy, that this is money that could be spent here, it could be saved by people for college education or whatever, but instead it's going to get out of this community. And we saw a demonstration when the sanitary district was here, along with the water company, on how they changed their prices. And the sanitary district was very careful to spread out the cost of a capital improvement over a long period of time, so that there would be a gradual increase in the rates instead of a 60% increase. So the next, I think we have to look at what our options are, because we can't just accept this as inevitable. I think there are some options, and we need to study them. And I've talked with some council members in Champaign, and I think the two cities should get together and figure out what some possible alternatives are, such as buying the company, because I don't think this is going to be good for us in the long run if we have this kind of situation. Okay, if you think the water company's bad, I think the cost to customers for the Ameren rate increase is at least 10 to 20 times as much in terms of actual dollars spent. For the city's budget, Bill Gray has estimated it could cost the city an extra $100,000 a year for street lights. We don't know what the exact numbers are, but next week we'll be coming back with a budget amendment for $17,000, which would be our cost of intervening in that rate case before the ICC if no other cities besides Champaign join us. But we are talking with Decatur, Bloomington, Normal, and Peoria, and there may be others. And the second item that we'll be bringing back is a resolution allowing the mayor to enter into intergovernmental agreements with other cities to intervene. And I think the only countervailing power that we can use on these is to have the cities join together and work cooperatively. And we are only taking the narrow issues of street lighting and fair return on investment. CUB is defending the customers in this rate case, and that's something that our consultant recommended because we just can't get into any more complicated things. I think we need to reform the way utilities are dealt with by the state of Illinois, and we're going to have to work with our legislators on this. This all fits into what's the proper way to price these things, what should the ownership be, and how should they be regulated. And this fits into our concerns about sustainability. We have higher than average water rates. Our rates are higher than publicly owned systems, and our electric rates also are higher, and both of those together are a drag on our economic growth. So I think we're going to have to start talking with the public and with our legislators and come up with a whole new way of dealing with these issues. And at the back, I've put in the article about the Tree City USA. So anybody have a question?
Questions for the mayor? Yeah, we appreciate the update.
Okay.
Did they talk about Kyoto Protocol?
Oh, I'll just say briefly, Kyoto protocols, the United States did not pass that treaty. 141 countries did. So it was Mayor Greg Nichols of Seattle who thought that this was an important thing, and he tried to get 141 American mayors to sign up to make up for the fact that we didn't have our countries sign up. And he's up to over 700 mayors at this point. So the cities really see the problem, and we're the ones that they're going to get stuck doing the work to implement all these things, and that's why we need some help with the funding, because we don't have the funding. But we will get stuck with the job.
Great, thanks. We have an announcement from Charlie.
I'm assuming that there's a draft bicycle master plan in each of your folders. Yeah, this has been through the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Plan Commission, and it's coming our way soon. It's in a period of open public comment, so I'd urge you to take a look at it. It's not a long read.
Okay, with no further business before us, we stand adjourned.